moderate this illustrious panel. My only claim to be on this panel is I walk a lot on the streets of Bangalore, and I can kind of recognize every other pothole in this part of the city. Right? So I was telling Suprita that maybe that qualifies me to kind of ask some of the questions to our experts here. Before we begin, we were discussing that we would want all of you here to wear two lenses, so to speak. One is, as citizens, what should we be doing? What should each one of us be doing? And two, as entrepreneurs, how do we really change the way things happen, and what kind of entrepreneurial perspectives can you bring to the conversation? So I want you to hold on to these two perspectives when we come to the Q&A, right? And maybe have a conversation around that. But let's get started. We have 40 minutes. Maybe what we'll do is we'll do a 25-minute banter conversation amongst us and then open it up to the floor. The first question that comes to my mind when we talk of redesigning urban spaces and rethinking on our streets is, if you were to just close your eyes and say, hey, if I were to say the best streets and the best urban spaces, what comes to our mind? What experiences, where have you been, and what kind of, and why do you think what you're saying, what you describe, is based on what parameters? Of course, Joel will talk about Singapore and the Singapore experiences, but Naresh and Aman, we were having a conversation. It's not about the best practice, next practice. We'll come to that, but what would come to your mind? What visual comes to your mind when we talk about that? Maybe we can start off with you.
Thank you. Thank you for asking that really good question. So, I think coming from Singapore's perspective, and let me remind all of you that Singapore is small. Obviously, we don't have the population of India and not as big. However, we have a lot of people in a very, very small space. Singapore, the entire land size is about 600 to 700 square kilometers with 6 million people packed in there. One of the most densely populated. So we, in a way, we have the same problems as India, major Indian cities. One thing we learned over all these years is basically two things: safety and security. I mean, safety and efficiency. Okay, how do you transport the most amount of people, especially new people, in the safest, most efficient way in terms of time? So these are the huge challenges that we faced in the very beginning. And I come back to this again, but what we realized was that you need the harmony of public and private transport. They need to work together. Entrepreneurs and city planners have to work hand in hand, have to cooperate. Of course, there's huge tension, we fight all the time, and regulators and all that. But there must be a common understanding that we all own this space, your space, every single space, and we all have a stake in it. And we all need to listen to each other in order to make it better.
Beautiful. Thank you. Safety, efficiency, and how do you collaborate to create better spaces? Naresh?
Yeah, so to give some background, I have been working with the city of Bangalore for now about 25 years. So, and most of the time, everybody sees this as an intractable problem. You don't know who to call if you don't get water supply. Forget about good quality roads or whatever it is. What has happened actually, it's not only the fault of government or politicians that our city, our cities do like this. If you're sitting in a space like this right now, and you sort of crinkle your eyes a little bit and ignore a lot of brown people here, you could actually be sitting in a space anywhere in the world, and this would be the same quality, right? But all you need to do is step out of this nice building, and there will be a ditch running with flowing sewage, and nobody to answer for it. So it's a bit of a strange conundrum that we have managed to fix this in our interiors, but we are not able to do this in our exteriors. Why is that? Is a problem. There are 2-3 issues. One is we tend to use what I call the world is always referred to in today's globalized world, though we call it globalized, as the developed West and the developing East, right? I would actually ask you all to look at it not as longitude but as latitude. It's actually the developed north and the underdeveloped south. It's a latitude problem, not a longitude. And the lessons we try to use as examples for us to become better is usually the Western examples.
Right.
We should actually be looking at Southern examples like, say, Singapore or Hong Kong or even Cape Johannesburg or maybe some places in Brazil along our latitude rather than longitude. And the last issue is that as a nation, as a psyche, the people of India do think that public property is somebody else's problem. It's not their, they don't own it. In software terms, many of you are software engineers, the internet is getting more and more privatized as we speak, right, every day. And that is referred to as the tragedy of the commons. The tragedy of the commons in India is a physical problem. We do not think that the commons, the street or the footpath outside your house belongs to you as a community property. The moment that attitude changes, a lot of the issues around why urban India cannot look as good as its, how can our exteriors look as good as our interiors, will change unless the psychological switch has to happen.
And where have you seen this really in play from all of your travels or experiences? Which?
Particularly, you see this a lot in Europe. You see this enforced in Singapore, and now the people own it. And China, I have been to China in 1991. People were doing exactly what they were doing here. They were using the walls as public toilets, spitting all over the place, and behaving very rudely. The streets were broken. I have been to Shanghai at that time. 10 years later, the Singapore and China have this minor advantage that whatever the boss says, everybody else better do. We have what I call a noisy democracy, where we have a country of 1.3 billion people with 2.6 billion opinions. So that is right. But we are what we are. We are a messy democracy.
Right.
And it's more, I think, attitude of everybody which matters. And don't keep thinking somebody else is going to do it. Unless you take ownership and that push comes to shove, then it will change.
This very much what you're saying is as kids we used to read about the story of somebody, anybody, everybody, nobody, right?
Exactly. Something like that.
Something like that. Madan?
So Madan, you asked a very interesting question. If I have a dream of a better Bangalore, what is that dream?
Yeah.
I am a very optimistic person, so I'm going to talk about only things which are possible and which we can do collectively.
Yeah.
If we want to experience Bangalore, Sunday 7 o'clock to try driving, walking, whatever, even right now. I'm not talking about 20 years ago when I came to Bangalore first time. Bangalore actually is beautiful. What we hate about this city is the traffic, is the air quality. And yes, we do have problems of potholes, the sewage and things like that. But I don't think that still, there is a chance for us to come together and take a U-turn and fix some of these issues. It is our problem as a citizens. We keep on cribbing about it. We'll say, okay, government is not doing that. Government is not doing this. But if you look back, we are the people who are throwing garbage at the city. Not government, right? Their lack of resources. We are a lot of people. And if we keep on throwing, spitting and usage of plastic and whatnot, trust me, when God can come here, nothing will change. It's on us. So that's, I think, my opening statement. But as a country, we were a developing economy. We are now coming a long way. And Naresh rightly said that China also went to the same journey. I think if collectively we take our own social responsibility and then do our bit and then put a right pressure on the government, they will do their act. There are challenges in the city. We know they built the road. After 15 days, you wonder what happened. There was one more wire to be, to be put into that, and they will take it. And maybe we have to fix that problem in this city, but otherwise it is a fixable thing.
Fascinating. So, clearly the call out is, hey, all of us live in the city and it's all of our collective responsibility to make sure that we make the city more livable than what it is today, and on various parameters. Right? Let me flip it around to say, a lot of us don't think that way, right? You know, unfortunately, all of us sit in our...
It's not completely our problem. We are also paying something called tax.
Exactly. So I want to come to that, to say that yes, we have a collective responsibility, but there are accountabilities that lie there. Two questions that I want to kind of throw out here, right? One, and Naresh, especially you've been butting heads with the government, but working with them in a variety of ways. How do we as citizens really engage with the government? Right? What do we do? How do we engage with the authorities to make sure that the city becomes better? One. Two, if each of you had all the powers, you had a magic wand to say, hey, I can make Bengaluru any which way I want to make it to be. And I don't know where the magic wand lies, whether it is with the BBD commissioner, chief minister, whoever. Imagine whoever that is who has the powers. What would you do? What would your priorities be? What would your top priority be and why? Yeah, this time you go.
So if I look around, a lot of cities which have now population similar to cities like Bangalore, like 10 million plus. The common thesis is that you need to have very, very good public transportation system. And the fact of the matter is, no matter whatever you do, you will be living away, little bit away from that. So if you're lucky, you live half a kilometer. If you're not so lucky, you are 2 to 3 kilometers from that spot. What city needs is a great public transportation system supported by world-class pedestrian footpaths, so that you can walk without fear, with dignity, and enjoy. I think walking is such an amazing thing. And then if you are living a little bit away, then you can use something much more comfortable. It can be an e-rickshaw in the context of our country, or it can be a bicycle, your own bicycle, or a shared bicycle for that matter. You don't want to sweat yourself because weather is there. You pick up a e-cycle, e-scooter, and if you club these two things together, then your commute will be much more, comfortable and efficient. And by this, we will be able to make city and mobility come together and make it much more livable and sustainable.
Thank you. Naresh?
See, we should not get into this trap of solution mongering. Right? It's easy to say if you there's no magic wand.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. The real issue is that you cannot sort of say problem here, let's put band-aid here, let's put band-aid there, and keep on doing event management. I call that. That's not city management. Like or whatever.
Yeah.
Or firefighting kind of approach. The real policy, the real issue in the city is really public policy. Right? And that is the accountability factor that we're speaking about. It's all very well to say, oh, the citizens are very bad and they're throwing trash everywhere and all that. But unfortunately, on the government side, we're also paying these guys something called taxes and stuff like that for them, and that job is not getting done because of 3 issues. One, there is a capacity issue. Many of them simply are not trained in. Anybody, there is not a single master of urban practice. Somebody has to study this. You need city managers.
Yeah.
It's not anybody can't just do it just out of the box. The second issue is that the politics of the city, because it is confused with being the state capital, is never run by the people who are our city representatives. They're always run by the next level of government. And that's a problem all across India, Indian cities, not just here. What is happening is the members of parliament who are supposed to make the law want to behave like the MLAs, want to make the local law. The MPs are supposed to be the lawmakers of the country. They don't want to do that. They want to actually make the local laws. The members of the legislative assemblies, MLA, wants to be the corporator. And every morning he wants people to go and say, please get me water connection, gas connection. This event management fix I'm trying to speak about.
Yeah.
The corporator, who's actually the representation of
What?
no, he only represents 40,000 people
Right.
at a time.
Yeah.
He is given no role at all, and typically comes from the ranks of, say, the people who take away our solid waste or take away who are involved in some maintenance activity, and their focus is actually to increase their business. It's not to govern the city. So the city now needs to experiment with what I call elected mayor, who's like the CEO of the city. They have to learn from business. They have to learn. We can't run the city. The city is run by the bureaucracy today. The commissioner of the corporation is way more powerful than the mayor of Bangalore, whose term lasts for 1 year. And most of the year goes in exchanging garlands or giving bouquets or showing up at some big shot lands of Bangalore. They'll wear robes and go and that's about it. They have no role at all. But at the same time, if you look at worldwide examples, you will find that anybody who becomes the mayor of a city of 8 million plus is usually the next prime minister or at least the chief minister of the state. So it is not in the interest of the state government to let local politics come up at all. But obviously this system isn't working. So we have been trying to tell the government now, let's look at a policy change. Let's experiment. Let's not say maybe a mayor and council also is a bad idea. We don't know. We have no idea. Like you can see what happened in New York City, right? When Bloomberg comes, what happened? That's a CEO kind of mayor who appoints his own set of people, and it operates like the American presidential system, which is, even though it's like that, it doesn't seem to be working very well, right? They keep firing Mr. American president fires somebody every day, I think. In his team, so you're fired, kind of thing, whatever. But yeah, so that's one level, right? From what I would say is not as an individual, and curiously, every single government department in India has a website with a lot of detail.
Yeah.
And when you ask what can you do, let me ask a question to the audience.
Yeah.
How many of you have seen the BBMP website? See, that's like 3 or 4. They have a fully functional website
And an app.
and an app and a complaint redressal mechanism. And everything actually works. Why does it work? Because nobody gets onto it. There are 10 guys in the BBMP office waiting for somebody to complain. So let's start with this audience. Because you don't assume, you assume an organization like that is still in the dark ages. Right? They're not. They actually have a proper functioning complaint, grievance redressal app.
So use that as the
Start with that. Then there is a second level where the street you live on or the neighborhood you live in will definitely have a resident welfare association. There are more than 2,000 in Bangalore today. It's the most. Somebody made a joke the other day saying that Bangalore has the most civic activists per square kilometer of any city in India. It's a density issue.
Yeah.
So start with that. Once you get into that and start understanding how a neighborhood works, then you start getting fingering with larger policy, with larger mobility. I agree with you that if there is a concept of end-to-end mobility, safe mobility, it makes life a lot easier. But it's not the only thing.
Okay. Thank you. Joel?
Thanks. So, if I can just share my experience in Singapore and also in China, I spent a lot of time in China. Firstly, I want to ask, any city planners here from the government? Oh, what?
Not from the government. They're not in the government.
Maybe you guys don't hear this first part that I'm telling you. So, from what I know, I have many Indian friends, and I think Indian people are proud people. I say this with the utmost respect. You guys have pride in yourselves, in your culture, in your country. So how does this translate to Singapore and China? Well, talking about civic mindedness, unfortunately, it doesn't happen overnight. What happened in Singapore was we actually studied civic mindedness in school. They taught us, how to be courteous, to be polite. It's like brainwashing. And with regards to public awareness about shared spaces and how did they educate us to respect the commons, like Naresh said. In our experience, it was pretty draconian. So Singapore is known, you speak, you get fined. You eat chewing gum, you get fined. Everything you get fined, right? But they went beyond that. Actually, those didn't really work because people had money to pay. Who cares? Money to pay. So then they started making people, you caught littering the second time, you have to go pick rubbish for the weekend. You send you to the beach or somewhere, Then that didn't work too. So finally, what worked? They started taking pictures of you and putting in the newspaper and putting your name there.
Wow.
Gerald Chang, got caught littering and you have to wear these vests. It says CW, corrective work order. Wow. So basically, they shamed you, and that worked because nobody wanted to appear in the newspaper because of littering.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I don't know whether that could work in India. I hope you wouldn't have to come to that, but that's what.
There's an entrepreneurial opportunity here to start a newspaper called The Shame of India.
Now, in the era of social media, this even worse. No, but they did that, and this is what happened in China. What they did was, the government, Singapore is China is a great firewall, censorship, right? But with things like that, the government just let everybody post. Somebody whose kid was peeing in a fountain in the park, they post, it went like fire. Shame the person or not? It really worked even, for example, so some of the Chinese then decided, okay, not to do this in China, but we do it when we go on a holiday. We take our bad habits overseas, right? You may see some reports in Japan, the cherry blossom season, beautiful, right? There's pictures of some Chinese tourists climbing the tree and just desecrating the cherry blossom. And the Chinese government, what they did was they banned these people from traveling. Can you imagine that your government saying that you are a lousy traveler, you give us a ban, then you cannot travel anymore? Yeah.
Wow.
So, I don't know whether this will work or whether this is even good for India, like it's the largest democracy in the world, but this is how we did it.
So enforce behaviors or here maybe even
Basically pride, right? Basically shaming the
Maybe we should ask all our religious leaders to issue a fatwa.
Okay, great. So let's come there and take a few questions. I have one more thought I'll park and maybe that can come as a question. One of the things that I firmly believe in, I work in a lot of the peri-urban and rural areas. I always keep thinking that there's so much of, I would say migration, but the commute between, you take a Mandya or a Tumkur or a Dodbadapur, the flow of people from that town into the city. So Bangalore is just not whatever square kilometers of Bangalore, its sphere of influence exists almost like 200, 300 kilometers radially outwards, right? So how do you design urban spaces that consider these rural areas and how do you create this urban infrastructure, right? Where there's a seamless flow of people, products, services that flow between the cities and the peri-urban areas, and that's a huge area because I've met various people who say, listen, for some things I have to come into the city, and when I come into the city it's a maze, and we end up spending so much of money and time, and it's very confusing. So I would also say that Bangalore is just not, or a city is just not only for the city dwellers, but even to the citizens who live in a 200, 300 kilometer radius, and the design has to consider maybe that aspect as well. So I'll park that thought. Maybe we'll come back with some questions and love to pick that up in one of the conversations. So over to you folks. What we'll do is, as a format, we'll take 3 questions at a go. Come back here, any one of you can respond to any one, and we'll go back to the next 3 till we are out of time. So we saw a few hands there. 1, yes, 2, and yes, please go ahead. Yeah, exactly.
Hello, I'm Mohammed Yasin. I'm from National Institute of Design. So my question was to Amit actually. So So this bike sharing problem is a very repeated brief in colleges, in design schools. So like most of us know that the major problem here is the behavioral problem, the human factors of it, not the technology as such. So was there some big insight that your company had that sold this idea to your investors, or is it just that you factored the mannerism for future business model?
Sure. So what we'll do is we'll take 2 more questions, then we can come back. So we can, yes sir, both of you. Yes.
For girls.
Huh?
Toilet
Toilet problem
problem.
for girls, for women.
Every bus stand should have 2 toilets.
Perfect,
Stainless
yeah.
steel toilets made for male and female. Water tank on top of it. Beer drinks,
Sure.
fill the water.
So you're saying how do you solve for that? Yes. I will come back to the next round.
Hi, this is Sunil. Just a question regarding tender for sure the roads that have been done in Bangalore. I somehow feel the width of the footpath there is somehow doesn't make sense. Just a thought on that. It's road to footpath, the ratio is.
So is it pedestrian first or vehicle first?
Neither.
It's neither. Okay. So let's take those 3 questions. So you had it
Let's start with
yeah.
the first one. So first of all, if you look, apply logic, any sense to that, I think doing what I did or have been doing for you was a crazy bad idea. Out of every 100 people I will meet, 99% of people will say, different hat. First of all, hey, I will never be on the road because someone will knock me, I'll die. Or someone will say that, oh, look at this pollution. If I come out of my car, I will die out of the brick, right? The brick phenomenon. Investors will say, look at this graveyard of bikes in China. Yes, same thing will happen in India. So everywhere we go, we'll actually hear these kinds of arguments or the so-called logical arguments. And then there's an illogical mind which says that, hey, this problem exists, let's solve it. How? We don't know. That's what the journey all about. So to answer your question, we actually had to solve for multiple problems. So when we started there was no infrastructure, there was no behavior to use this kind of product, there was no rules and regulation, policy framework, nothing. And we knew that for this business model to exist, we actually have to show some ray of light or hope, where collectively we can make a argument that, hey, see, this works. And what we did is a typical entrepreneur where you don't try to solve everything. You say, this is my playground. And in our case, the playground happened to be Bengaluru area where I used to work and I used to live. In fact, I still live and work there. And then we put some bikes on the road and try to understand the behavior that what's happening and people will be using it or not. How many of you actually remember irctc.com site? Was that the first e-commerce thing ever you did in your life? Although a lot of youngsters, so they will not know the pain of standing in the queue, going at 4 a.m. to be at the part of the queue and get the ticket. Trust me, irctc.com website sucked like crazy. You press a button, it will take 10 minutes. But it was better than you sitting for 4 hours in the queue. That narrative worked for Yulu as well. Now imagine a situation, in fact some of you must be using Uber today, and just after the session, try booking Uber. You press button, first of all it will say no cabs. If you get the cab, if they're completing the trip nearby, and sometimes this guy will say, sir, where do you want to go? Bengaluru, he will cancel on you. So your life is sorted. In fact, this will be probably the 3rd time I will be using Uber to work, to home, and I know my life will be very miserable. Very miserable. I have walked, took Uber, took buses, finally reached my home when I start from here in the evening. So that narrative worked for us in Bengaluru area, where a lot of tech parks are there. No Uber, no Ola, nothing. And then there was something blue color bike which you can just scan and take your home. Wow. And people basically found out that rather than they wasting time, half an hour to find an Uber, Ola, wasting another half an hour or 1 hour to cover 3-kilometer distance, and really paying a bomb to pay this guy to take you home. Versus, there's a Yulu, you pick it up, you pay 10 bucks, 15 minutes you are at home. Everything was sorted, everything was forgiven, nobody was worried about their life, pollution, because moving from A to B was the biggest thing they wanted to achieve. So that's how we solved for that. Long answer, but this is how it worked.
That was your question.
Yeah, so, no. See, and I'll answer it from a slightly bigger perspective. See, India is a leapfrog economy. It's not an economy, it's not an incremental economy. I mean, from a new business idea and an entrepreneurship or a new business model. Like we jumped over big box stores directly and we went into e-commerce. We started with, we jumped over the landline story and jumped straight into digital. So we always do that leapfrog. The rest of the world has built a lot of roads and they're busy breaking it down and making it into footpaths. All over the planet, except India. And we still have a problem in this country saying that, I assume specifically you're asking the question about, say, why St. Mark's Road has a footpath bigger than at some point in the road itself.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with the footpaths or the roads. It's got something to do with called transportation design. Right? When you have a throughput on a road, if you have 2 lanes at the beginning, the problem with, say, St. Mark's Road specifically, since all of you are familiar with the area and if none of you don't know, it's 50 meters from here, is that at the beginning of the road, the footpath, the entire what we call the right of way, which is compound wall to compound wall in layman's terms, what you can muck around with, including footpath, drain, infrastructure, carriageway, lighting, whatever, footpath to footpath. Right? It's called ROW, the right of way, is only 40 feet. And at the other end, there are somewhere near Koshis, it is 70 feet. Now you would think that why not, so in 40 feet you can put 2 lanes going like this and 2 lanes coming like that. And there is a minimum standard for a national footpath. It's 2 meters, is usually the same. It cannot be less than 2 meters, where the population density does not go above 200 people per hour. If it is more than that, the footpath has to increase. But unfortunately what happens is if you go and say, okay, now the road has become wider somewhere in the middle, the ROW, and you put 3 lanes, what will happen? Which is exactly what was happening before the road was happened. The guys will come like that, they see 1 more lane after a little while, they'll go into that. When it comes back to MG Road, it is 60 feet again. It is only 40 feet there again. It's not wide enough. So everybody will try to join the 2 lane, from 3 lane you cannot make it back into 2 lane. It will only create congestion. If you notice now, after it has 2 full lanes going like that, 2 full lanes going like that, almost never is a traffic jam on St. Mark's Road. Earlier it used to be only like that. I did the same thing for Church Street. Right? Church Street is 30 feet at Brigade Road and 65 feet at KC Das. And let's face it, man, there are out of 12 million people in the city, 10 million are pedestrians. Why would you surrender your right to some 10 lakh cars? I want more footpaths everywhere, and rather than more roads everywhere, which also discourages people. If you keep seeing wide roads and huge flyovers, that is why I keep fighting with the government saying don't build these flyovers and elevated roads and all that, because people will see that, say, oh, they're building new roads, let me buy another car. And by the time the project is completed, they're back to square one, because it started with an assumption of X amount of cars. Because you built all that infrastructure, the number of cars doubled. And now you need an elevated road on top of elevated road, on top of another elevated road. In the end, there will be only roads and no buildings at all.
And then you put a signal on an elevated road.
The entire planet is moving to a realization that instead of going to a fitness center to be fit, it's better to walk around the city to be fit. Okay, let's not go to an air-conditioned room where probably it's more interesting for young people, but at least for older people, I think walking is a great exercise, and pedestrianization should be the fundamental value of city planning. Whether it's a neighborhood,
Yeah.
whether it's the city center, most city centers in Europe, like I was in Stockholm a few months ago, 6 square kilometers, which is roughly the center of Bangalore also, is completely pedestrian. And you will ask what happens if I have a heart attack and I'm in the middle of it. An emergency vehicle is allowed to come, fire, ambulance. At 12 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the morning, vehicles are allowed to enter to service the shops and take away the garbage.
Right.
But rest of the day, zilch. And all that is there is some fancy bikes like what you guys make. And for people who need, and those bikes are also not allowed to move faster than 10 kilometers an hour. It's a speed governor. Right? You cannot zip around. Like, this is the future, and we should leapfrog over the mistakes of the West. Just like we have leapfrogged in technology, we have leapfrogged in many social spheres, and don't repeat their mistakes and then say, okay, we'll correct it. They say, you guys screwed up, we understood from you. Let's go straight into a pedestrianized world. Let's not go through the vehicle transition.
Thank you. That's super. I think we will all have a lot of different conversations around the facts that you put. Joel, the question I want to is take it slightly broader and talk about how do you design a city for probably women friendly, right? And the whole gender equality question of saying how do you make it friendly, safe for women, and any experiences or any thoughts around that. The toilet for women is one such example.
Well, like I said earlier on, key thing is always safety and efficiency, right? In our experience, that is crucial. First, to frame this whole thing, and to follow up with Naresh, I'll come back to this. To frame this whole thing, I heard a quote, from a pretty enlightened transport minister. He said, the mark of a rich city is not how many, I won't use this word poor, but normal people can buy a car, but how many rich people choose to take the bus or walk.
Yeah.
This should be a target for every city. Okay. And to be able to walk, it means women must feel safe as well.
Correct.
In a country like Singapore, and I think now in China as well, unfortunately some freedom of, what's it called, monitoring, we have to give up. We have CCTV cameras at all the dark areas, at the so-called nightlife areas where people are more rowdy. We ban alcohol. Like, I give you an example. Singapore has a little India, okay, like a China, whatever. A couple of years ago, some people got drowned and got into a fight and they started rioting and burned the police car. So what they did after that was a curfew in the whole area. No alcohol after 8 p.m. Right. So I don't recommend going to such draconian measures, but really, safety has to be paramount when you think of designing footpaths, alleyways, and all that sort of thing. And it's basically just, you have to start with brightly lit first, right? That is the main thing. So how countries like Singapore, we are designing our footpaths, we're designing certain things called like smart posts, smart lamp posts, where everything in that lamp post, for example, is fully renewable energy, it's got solar panels, blah blah. Then it has IoT systems.
Okay.
It can even charge vehicles, and it has CCTVs, and it even has, I think it even has like base stations where panic as well, panic buttons and all of this. So, but this is low cost. So I would say the first thing you should first be brightly lit. You know, that should be your starting point. Yeah. The next thing I want to throw out there is this efficiency part. So in Singapore, we set our government and people, they set a white paper and we set ourselves a limit of 40 minutes. in the next 10 years, we want to set a limit of 40 minutes. Every citizen must be able to travel by public transport from one place to another place in 40 minutes or less.
Wow.
That is the target. So I think we should look at it as a time, you know. Maybe the average transit in Bangalore is 1 hour, I don't know, 1 hour 15 minutes. Of course, you can't reach 40 minutes immediately, but you should see incremental improvements. And entrepreneurs and engineers, all you out there, that's what we should be thinking as well. Thinking how maybe in your commute to go to school or whatever, from the center or out into the center, how could you improve this by 5 minutes, by 10%, 20%? And what Amit says, think of it as a sandbox. Don't even think about solving the whole issue from the beginning, right? Think about solving your own problem with your friends, your school, or your workmates. How to solve that, whether it's micro-mobility or whatever. If you can create a solution, either with an e-bike or with better footpaths or something like that, lead it by engaging in creating the solution, working with partners. I think that's
Beautiful. I was just thinking maybe one of the vision for Bangalore should be every citizen should be able to move in 40 minutes. We can sometimes get stuck in traffic jams for hours, but at least everybody should have the right to move. I saw one last hand. We have a question there, here, and there was a lady on the back. Okay. Yes. So we'll come back. Last set of questions, and then we can wind up. Oh yeah, please.
So that's for Naresh and Joel. You were talking about how important pedestrian is for health and environment and stuff like that. Where do you see underground infrastructure, tunnels, as an alternative to building flyovers and over the ground infrastructure? And do you think that's the future? Do you think that's going to come to India soon?
Sorry. We'll just take two more questions and then we'll do it as a winding up comments. We had one there. Yeah. Thank you.
It's working.
Yes.
So my question was with Naresh. We are seeing a rapid urbanization all across India and some other cities as well. So my question was, what are the solutions for that? It's already overpopulated. It's going to get more populated. Are we looking at polycentric cities? Or what are we looking at? And Madan can also add to it. What I feel is that a lot of migration from rural to urban, is it really necessary? Can
Exactly.
we leapfrog to
Exactly.
de-urbanization?
Absolutely.
If you can say it.
Yeah.
I just wanted a view.
Sure, great. And we'll take one last question.
My question is to Naresh.
Okay.
So I just wanted to know that since it's about future of mobility and electric vehicles are coming fast, is it right for regulators and the government to put forth the infrastructure for charging, or as currently they are just promoting the private players to install the infrastructure rather than only by themselves and then providing the
Service.
service, so that the usage of the electrical vehicles becomes more and easier rather than having their own station.
Sure. Great.
I just want to know.
Yeah, I think both Joel and Amit can address that as well. So take any of those questions and we can address that and maybe any other closing thoughts you have and we can wind up with that as well.
No, I have a slightly contrarian view to I think there's a huge push among entrepreneurs and many people to start saying that the government should start providing public infrastructure, charging stations, and put it all over the place. And I think the gentleman from Ather Energy was here. What is the range of electric bike? 400 kilometers on a charge?
For Ether, it's about 1700.
Let's say 60
On a charge? What about a car?
The newest electric, like Hyundai Konas, they do 300 kilometers.
Yeah, so 2 to 300. So really speaking, you should be charging that vehicle at your home. And you should be thinking of public infrastructure as an emergency top-up. Rather than putting a lot of moving, because we need a lot more of the resources that we have for more important things, like the sewage or or footpaths, rather than providing a service to a nascent industry, which is in a catch-22 situation. I fully appreciate I am the architect of Aether Energy, by the way, so I know what the problem is. So I built their factory and their offices and all that stuff. So the issue is really, initially at least, till the industry catches on, it should be treated as emergency charging, and people should be, the major charging should happen in homes also. I think that's one part of it. The second question was
there was one
about tunnels.
and the whole, yeah.
Right. So tunnels as an idea has been floated around for a long time. Who was the tunnel question, right? So Bangalore sits on a bed of granite.
Yeah.
The correct name for the granite is peninsular gneiss. It is the hardest mineral substance available on the planet right now. It's called granite. Okay, digging through that costs 7 times as much as shoving stuff on the surface. To make which is why Bangalore still doesn't have a proper underground railroad system. It takes forever, and the technology is still designed for softer rock. The first time many of these characters have also encountered that the drill bit gets replaced every month, and it's diamonds, right? It's very expensive and very difficult. That is, having said that, I was a guy who fought a lot for putting at least the metro in Bangalore underground under MG Road. I think MG Road has been destroyed by the metro, right? And a lot of other places. But even if you go to developed countries like Singapore, the metros all come out of the ground at the ring road of the city, and after that it's all overground. It's much more expensive to do it even underground anywhere. Right? And many other countries have done it long ago. I don't know how they pulled it off. London and Paris is mostly underground, but it's in a developing country we want reach more than beauty, more than aesthetics. And providing it for cars and all that is not a great idea, because the real idea is like when you talk about de-urbanization, we have to start with what is called demotorization. This cannot be an endless wave of today in Bangalore, 2,500 to 3,000 vehicles are registered every day. Can you imagine that's 90,000 vehicles to 1 lakh vehicles every month. So for a population of 1.2 crore, we have a vehicle population of 80 lakh. Do you know what the proportion is in Singapore? For 6 million people, how many vehicles do you have? Maybe 1 million?
Less than that.
Not even a million. Not even 10. They have 10 lakh private vehicles for a population of 60. Yeah. Can you believe that? And Bangalore is now less than 1:2. So the thing is actually to demotorize the city. Second, 80% of Bangalore is, unfortunately, you can say that why don't we develop Hubli, Dharwad or some, Koppal or Gadag or Udupi or whatever it is. The problem is all you guys want to hang around here and go to the pubs here. Techies. I'm saying this as a, but really on a serious note, the greatest critical pool of IT talent and software talent, and even now what I call IT is over, BT never really took off. But the two things that are taking off in Bangalore and which is pulling more and more people here is ET, which is energy technology, and AT, which is aerospace technology. So IT, BT finished. Now it's going to be ET, AT, and that is causing even more jobs. You pointed it out in your this thing. It needs more tech, and like 50% of an electric vehicle's brains is software. Right? And in comparison to it's a laptop on wheels, that's all it is. It's mostly software. So how are you going to create this economic activity in Davangere or in Belgaum or how will it's a cart before the horse? Who's going to do it?
Joel, any closing comments or questions?
Naresh made this thing about leapfrog totally correct. And that's what the target should be, especially for India. Look at China. They leapfrog credit cards, they just want cashless. It can be done, Don't follow the developing world, don't play their game. Play your own game, and you will win. Because you have the size, you have the population, and you have the youth, and you obviously have the talent. Regarding tunnels, yes, like Naresh says, it's just so expensive. Just to give you guys an example how expensive it is. A lot of people think, the metro is the solution. And sure, Singapore can do it, Japan can do it. Let's look at the facts. The New York subway, the London tube, I think they're about 200 years old. You know, our Singapore metro, we spent hundreds of billions already. It's been building for 40 years. You guys know how rich Singapore is, right? How rich and how small. And we're not done. It took us 40 years and we're only halfway done. Right? With such a stable government and so much money. So there has got to be a better way. There has to be much better, like more efficient use of your on-ground spaces, use technology, mobility. And if I may answer just one part of your question, and maybe make a bold prediction. And this answers the gentleman's question about just now about battery technology. This is the good charging. So my prediction is like this. You don't have to worry. We all don't have to worry about electric vehicles and how they're going to be charged and what we're going to build infrastructure. You know why? If you see what I see with the R&D being done in China and Israel and Europe, everything is going towards fast charging. If you look at what Shell, Mobil, Exxon, their petrol stations, they are already starting to convert a fuel that pumps to electric. We're talking about from ABB 300-400 kilowatt DC chargers for cars. They're coming. Okay? The technology is there. You just have to figure out the heat to manage the heat. The battery technology, we don't even need solid state anymore. They are working towards, just with the current technology, to charge it within minutes and seconds. So what does that mean? That means the current infrastructure of petrol stations will be converted to fast charging stations. You don't need so much government budget to add to this. The oil companies of this world, they will pay for it. The car companies, the OEMs, we will pay for it. The battery companies will. Because it's coming and this is inevitable.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for a scintillating discussion. We could have gone on, but this is a lot of, as you said, we're drinking from the fire hose. There's a lot of ideas here. I just want to leave you with one thought, and to your point on how do we solve for it. And I just want to end with this. I was asking one of the entrepreneurs in the back of beyond of Chittoor, saying, what does access mean to you? And the only thing he asked me was, how much time and money do you spend to take an Aadhaar card photocopy? I said, listen, the photocopy shop is across my street, 1 minute to go, 1 minute to take, 1 minute to come back, maybe 5 minutes and 50 paisa. He says the same thing for me is 6 hours and 250 rupees. Because he says the nearest Xerox photocopy shop is 20 kilometers away. I will go take a bus comes in once in an hour, there's no power, I wait for an hour or two, I get it and come back, and I spend 25 rupees, my transportation cost and my cost of opportunity for half a day is that much. Till we do not solve for that, to Naresh's point on the economic side, there'll always be a migration into the city. So from a city planning perspective, we also need to figure out radially how do we go and create that entire environment out there so that there's no need for us to attract people to come into the city. Of course, there will be a magnet, but we need to create that spikes out, right? So that's worth thinking about as well. Thank you very much. Really great.